Hey there, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm happy to be on this call with you, on this recording with you.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Something we've been saying at my house is, where's your head and your heart?
Yeah, I like that. Where's my head? My head is good. It's feeling better. Yesterday, I feel like the last week has been very full, just a lot of stuff going on. It's just like one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And then, when I get home, it's like, all right, work and stuff is done, but now there's the work of taking care of my home and dinner and my stepdaughter and all that stuff. So yeah, it's been very full. But that's all right. Today is spacious, so my head feels good to be able to relax. And yeah, my heart feels present, strong, calm. Yeah, yeah. Good things. A lot of things, but good things going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
I feel too very centered and ready. I have been healing my ankle injury, and that has proved to be this like experience of like what am I doing? It's put a lot of things into perspective. And
Hmm.
um at the same time, I'm also doing like a clearing right now. And so I just don't feel great, but I feel excited about what we're creating here for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So Sarah, just for our listeners, tell me more of what you're doing and how people can get in touch with you and like what you have to offer them.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. I'm a massage therapist and I'm an educator of massage therapy. So I teach other people how to use their feet to deliver a therapeutic massage. But I also work with women and mothering and um, group and group coaching, group somatic movement together.
Mhm. Nice.
How about you? What are you up to these days?
Yeah, so one-on-one coaching with men, group coaching with men, holding a men's circle, and also massage therapy. Doing less of it these days, it seems, and more coaching, more men's work. I'm also putting together a retreat for some time in the future. So there's still a lot of work to do there. I just have the idea and a lot of kind of general outline, but not too specific yet. But I'm excited to be working on that. I'm looking forward to it. So
That's very exciting.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, so today we were going to talk about ego in group healing or group circles.
Yeah. That's such a I think it's an interesting topic to discuss because, I feel like if I were someone who was looking for a certain conversation about how to be in group, I don't know if I would seek out the ego, like a conversation about the ego in the group. But as we have discussed, and as I can imagine this conversation can go, it will probably be very relevant.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. Like that might not be the first thing that people are researching when they're thinking about that, but I think it is very relevant and really important because I think the ego comes up or can come up more in group work than one-on-one work. If you're working with a coach or a therapist one-on-one, I think there's a higher likelihood of getting triggered or having that ego arise when you're in a circle of, you know, 6, 10, 15, 30 people, something like that. Just the way somebody is or the way they speak or something, how they carry themselves or whatever can maybe get under your skin. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you how do you recognize that? Like when you see it, what does it feel like?
Yeah, that's a good question. It for me, it's always about comparison. It's always about comparison either to myself or to some standard that I have, you know? So you can be, or I could be sitting in a circle and listening to another man or another person talk, and or just I'm sitting there looking at them, listening to their words, and I'm not quite hearing everything because there's a voice in my own head talking, saying a lot of things. It's usually pretty critical, you know. Oh, this judgments about this person, from, and like a lot of times it can be like you've never seen this person before in your life, and here they are, and all of a sudden they're this, they're that, they're the other thing, and a lot of chatter going on up here. So yeah, that's what I notice. It's immediately like judging, analyzing, kind of picking apart this other person. Yeah, I'm kind of interested to talk about like what you and I define ego as. I feel like there can be a lot of definitions, especially in the world of therapy and psychology. I mean, not Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, and definitions of super ego and the id, and all this kind of stuff. So let's dive into that. Like, we can see it pop up, but what actually is it? Where's it coming from? And what's it doing? What does it want? So what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like when I see ego in group sessions or group situations, it's a very visceral feeling for me. It's very like, oh, this is what's going on. There's kind of this like othering that is happening.
Mhm.
Um, like if I recognize somebody, I don't know, sometimes it's like talking louder, or someone, maybe it's somebody who's like taking up a lot of the space or something. There's a part of me that feels kind of like I want to retreat and I want to go away. I want to be like, ooh, that's like an ick feeling, you know? There's kind of like this, ooh. So like that's how I recognize it. That's how I can feel it in the space.
Yeah.
Um, and then with all of the work that I've done through mind body coaching and my own trauma healing, it really comes down to compassion, and like having so much compassion for the person who is in that ego space of like, oh, this, like that's the space to which they're coming from.
Yeah.
And it's not a like othering anymore. It's more of like a, how do we hold them in love?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like that is the medicine there. Um, yeah, and I want to go a lot more into that, but for for those of you who are listening, I feel like especially in spiritual circles, like the ego can get a really bad rap. And in the world of psychedelics, there's ego death and all this stuff. And there's certain spiritual perspectives that kind of tout like getting over or getting beyond the ego, or somehow destroying or negating or getting rid of the ego. And I kind of want to speak to that. Um, I feel like the ego is an important and necessary part of our identity. Like like I was saying about definitions, I feel like ego can be like your human personality. It can be a broad term there. But I like to, the thing that I feel like we're talking about here in this conversation is kind of a part of the identity that specifically believes in a lack. There's an inherent lack of something or everything. It's actually really undefined because this voice, this part of yourself, um, seems to move a lot, right? At least it does for me. And so, um, but I think that this is an essential, it's a part of who we are. It's a part of our identity structure, in this definition. And it's a critical voice that believes in lack. right? It's like, I'm not good enough, or they're not good enough, or there's not enough of this, or there's not enough of that, or and that can turn into, well, if they're not good enough or I'm not good enough, rather than feeling sad, it can feel angry at the other person. So, um, or can go into attacking another person, either internally or externally. So yeah, I would define it as a self-critical, judgmental aspect of self that I think its goal is to try and make you feel better, right? But it's kind of like, I feel like it's trying to solve a problem that it has created, right? If you don't pay attention to it, and if you work on loving yourself, there's nothing that you need to get. There's no better that you can be. So it's making you feel like you're not good enough, which isn't true. So it's creating a false reality. And then it's trying to fix that false reality by making yourself good enough. And it can do that by putting the other person down or elevating yourself in some way in your mind, right? So that's kind of like its strategy, how it behaves and how it moves. Um, but it's a voice, it's an aspect of yourself that believes that there's not enough, you're not enough. And ultimately, it's not true, but it is part of your mind that deserves to be, included and cared for, cared about. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's protective too.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a big quality. That's a major quality of like, um, I've been hurt. Other people outside things have hurt me, and we don't want to let that happen anymore. Right.
Right.
So let's protect, defend, or go on the offensive to prevent that from happening in the first place.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I hear you saying in the psychedelic world, it's kind of like the ego death is the ultimate, the like goal of possibly some session or some kind of experience. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is do you think that is the goal? Do you think there's something other to be had?
I think no, I don't think it is the goal. And I don't think moving towards that goal or desiring that goal is actually helpful. It's something that can happen, and it can be a very beautiful thing. I think the term ego death gets around, especially for those who are unexperienced and for those who are not coming at it in a really serious way. It's like, oh yeah, I need to get, and I don't know that it's all that prominent. I think it's not, not what everybody's talking about, but it is a thing.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I've definitely heard it.
yeah, yeah, and I don't think it's the most important thing at all, but um I think it's something that can happen temporarily within a psychedelic journey where you don't perceive yourself in the same way anymore, and the identity that you have been attached to perhaps your entire human life seems to fall away, and you perceive yourself in a different light or in a different way or in a bigger or more whole way, and it can be an incredibly beautiful and freeing experience. But it doesn't last. And I don't believe that you can get rid of your ego through the use of psychedelics. And I don't think you can get rid of it in a forceful manner through, in normal mundane states of consciousness either. I think what happens is it begins to soften and almost dissolve through self-love. But it never quite goes away. But you can get to a place where negative self-talk doesn't exist. And that might be a long journey for some people, might be shorter for others. But yeah, yeah. The word death implies like a killing, and I just don't like that approach, you know. It's like I said, like a loving, and a reintegrating rather than a destroying or removing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's almost like inviting the ego to coffee to say,
Yeah.
like, what would you like to be heard, or how would you like to be heard? What are you trying to say?
Yeah, I think that is such a more productive route to take of like, I mean, this voice exists because of prior life experiences where pain, in my opinion, where pain or trauma has come about, you know. I think, well, certainly yes, but I think it comes about simply by having a human body and being here on Earth. I don't think you can be here without one. And like going back to what you're saying, I think that is the best approach. You know, like there's this part of yourself that has strong feelings and desires, and to sit down with it and say like, what's up? What do you need? You know, how can I help you? How can I help you? And not jump on its bandwagon and like decide to take up its cause and its initiative, but like, what do you really need? What can I give you? What kind of caring can I bring to you?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's such a great strategy.
So I'm thinking when you see this in a group situation, like either in a group healing session or just like, I don't know, even if you went to a concert or you were like at dinner with friends or something like that, and you see ego of someone, maybe even yourself, like if you see ego present and we think about interacting with ego in that way of like, let's have a loving conversation. I just wonder how that would look.
Yeah, I think that it requires it's not an easy thing to do in the moment, and it requires someone who's become really dedicated to their personal healing to have the awareness to spot it come up and all the times that it does is challenging because it comes up so often. It's so unconscious because we have identified with it. We've identified with that voice, and so we just don't even need to like pull it out anymore. We're like, no, this is just part of reality. How this talks, what it's doing, all the feelings that it ignites inside of your body is just part of life. So let's just keep moving. You just keep going down the track. So it's very challenging, I think, to be able to stop and notice, oh, it just came up and just said some shit about that person driving that car next to me in traffic. Oh, here it just came up when my boss said that. Oh, it just came up when my child said this. It just came up because I'm sitting in a spiritual circle doing healing work, or I'm at a fucking sound bath or something like that, right? Like to notice it so consistently requires a lot of practice, and it requires like intention and dedication. And yeah, so noticing is the first step, being able to notice and call it out before bringing in love and compassion and listening to that. You might not be able to get there yet to do the love and compassion thing, but noticing it is a huge win, and noticing it as much as possible is a huge win, because then you start to differentiate yourself. You create more space internally where previously that voice was you or is you, right? And now you're like, oh, here's this going on. So the very act of noticing means there's a part that you is noticing that's different than that part, right? Um, and that's really critical. And then the work of not just doing the love and the compassion, but moving over towards this other identification, this broader identification of, a loving, you know, unlimited being of consciousness, whatever, a more truer, fuller self, that the noticing is a big part of the work, and beginning to separate or suss out, that's huge. Um, let's bring it into like sitting in the circle. What are you gonna do? What do you do? I have, in the last several years, this has been a piece of work for me because I've sat in some circles, I've been on some retreats, and I've gotten really triggered, and my ego has come up in big ways when sitting in a group, specifically around healing.
Mhm.
Like when ego comes up when you're driving the car, you're at work or whatever, it's normal. But here, I mean, like that's normalized, for all of us, like I was just saying. But what happens, what's it like when you are intentionally trying to heal and become a better person, or become more actualized inside of yourself, and you're at an event, you're at a thing, and this is what your intention is, and boom, your ego just really fucking comes up because you're triggered about something that's going on in the circle or somebody. How do you handle that, you know? Yeah, I think it's just maybe more heightened. It's more heightened when you're in those spaces.
Mhm.
It is for me.
Yeah. Well, and as a somatics person, I'm thinking like, and I love what you're saying about the noticing and the slowing down. Nervous systems love slowness. So how can we be slower? Um, and I feel like in healing sessions, okay, something's coming to me about this. Okay. So in healing work and spiritual circles and communities, there is we still live in America, right? And we still live in these like very Puritan type places where it's kind of like this is right, this is wrong, this is the right way to do this is not spiritual, or this is
Right.
spiritual, you know. And I feel like the ego, that's like the ego's playground or something, because it's like, oh, well, I really like this one person is going to be the one to show me the way or something like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've the antithesis to that, right, is like being in group and handling the nuance. There's like no nuance when there's ego, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, where and how can we handle nuance?
Yes.
Do
Yeah.
we have the capacity to handle nuance if we live in a binary existence of like right, wrong,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I hear you. Like that can be, I've noticed that, and it feels very real that like this is what is true and right and what we're doing, and this isn't.
Hmm.
Or you've done it wrong, or let me teach you about how to do it better or the right way or whatever. And yeah.
And
When
something that came up for me and a couple of my people yesterday, my friends, was the whole world of like Instagram and like Reels and like TikTok, where we
Yeah.
have these like really short clips of like maybe into someone's life, or maybe like little micro learning things or something like that. And what I was saying to my friend is like, I really feel like as a culture, we are not resilient enough to handle that. We're not
Yeah.
evolved enough to like be able to see yourself whole and
Hmm.
complete over here while like going through the reels or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of those influencers are like, this is how you do life,
Yeah.
fill in the blank. And I could see where like ego then becomes, I have to do this, or I'm not accepted or included into the group.
Yeah.
It's that like good, bad, and no
Yeah.
room for anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, social media is just, oh, that's a whole other topic to talk on
But
of how that triggers ego, and how we're maybe very few of us are really prepared to handle what's being thrown at us in that space. And yeah,
I feel like the spiritual world specifically is just,
yeah,
I mean, toxic is not even the right word. It's like I don't know. Um, yeah, it's problematic at
yeah,
best.
yeah. I would say so. I feel like, and we spoke about maybe doing another recording about this, that spirituality has not only become commodified but turned into like material asset of something. Like if I just dress this way, if I use these words, if I do these behaviors and do this stuff, then I'm a spiritual person. I am a new age spiritual person, and I believe in all this, and I'm here to change the world. I'm a light worker, right? So there's it's been spiritual concepts, like modern and new age spiritual concepts have almost been co-opted by the ego. It's become another tool to make oneself whole or to validate oneself when that isn't necessary in the first place. You're fine and perfect exactly as you are. If you live in fucking Oklahoma and your family's, cattle ranchers or whatever, you're a spiritual being. You don't have to chant. You don't have to have crystals. You don't have to do any of that shit. Right. So it's kind of, yeah, been co-opted by ego, and those identities and that feeling, that structure can be brought into healing spaces because spirituality is about healing. And here now we've got a super ego that has like clothed itself in spiritual concepts, that is now trying to run the show, you know. And all of that sounded critical of those people. And I want to say, like, that's fine. I don't care if people are doing that. Go ahead and do that. Like, everyone's path is different. And I think sometimes you must go through and do that kind of stuff to grow, to learn and somehow deepen beyond it. So I really don't have a problem with people doing that. Well, maybe I have a little problem because it feels like it confuses things sometimes. But also, I just want to say that I have like acceptance and grace for people who are showing up that way, who have identified themselves in that way, because I don't know the whole fucking story. I don't know how this all ends. And I know that those people are doing some good. But are they also doing some harm? Probably, but so the fuck am I. So is everybody,
Right.
So, I'm just saying, I'm not one to judge. I don't have any grounds for, some arbiter of truth or what's right and wrong, you know. But yeah, that's just another flavor, another way that the ego can make itself present and affect things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I think that the awareness, like you were saying, is the key there, right?
Yeah.
Is like being able to recognize when we're starting to feel ego
Right.
come up. And from a nervous system standpoint, it's like we're meant to co-regulate with people.
Yes.
So like you and I talking here, we're co-regulating, but honestly, like in person is a better our systems are talking more so that we can be in a more compassionate and loving space to say, maybe not even say anything, but just like have the awareness like, oh, there's an ego present and we can be with that ego
Yeah.
and continue on our whatever we're doing,
Yeah.
whatever the situation is.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And the noticing, um, we were talking about that. I don't know, something got triggered in my mind when you started your thought about the noticing, but I've forgotten it now. Um, yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay. It requires a lot of honesty, actually. It requires a lot of honesty, um, to s- to say this is an ego or this is my ego, or you're not even going to say that. What if you're honest, you're going to say I'm triggered and I'm feeling angry or judgmental at this other person, or I feel right now that I need to make myself better than this other person. And that requires a little humility. It requires some humbleness and honesty of like, this is actually true for me right now.
Mhm.
Um, that I am judging this person, or I'm trying to prop myself up, or I'm going to say or do something or share a story that like shows the group or shows this other person that I'm better or more evolved than them or something like that, like to be honest about that, is huge, huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, I know that you do a lot of group work, like group sessions. Would you call them sessions? Group?
I do call them sessions, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you like what do you when you see an ego present, like is there some action you take toward it, or do you, or is it just more like being with it?
Yeah. Um, I usually don't pay attention to it. If an individual is really expressing from their ego and is trying to show themselves off or trying to get some sort of gratification um, through their share or through being heard, I usually I just don't put a lot of focus there. I don't take time away from them. I
Yeah.
recognize it and I'm like, okay. And I also am like, this is where they're at, and that's fine. And I usually, it, I feel like the ego is almost the opposite of the vulnerability. So if I notice a person is really in their ego and trying to puff themselves up or whatever, I try to somehow ask questions or redirect them to being vulnerable and being a little more real, you know, by just kind of checking it a little bit, like, hmm, is that how you really feel? Or maybe I wouldn't use those words, but just pushing back and asking them questions that help them dive deeper into the emotional truth of what they're sharing instead of having the defense of yeah, I already solved this. I worked past it and I've grown, or whatever they're presenting. Yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
great.
And sometimes there's really nothing you can do about it. Like I feel like the core members of my group, everybody is really put down that ego guard, and they are there to be vulnerable because they are so invested in their personal healing. Sometimes I get guys that are interested in coming, that are interested in doing group work, and they show up for a session or two, and they just can't drop that barrier, and they just can't show their pain, can't show their weakness and their vulnerability. Weakness, not actually a weakness, but and they just can't. And usually those people do not come back. Um, if they do continue to come back, I see a softening because there's 9 other guys in the circle that are being more real, that are being vulnerable, that are being honest, and they kind of get the program, right? So yeah, I don't do a whole lot of work there. It's a little bit, and then they kind of weed themselves out or they shift.
Yeah, I can imagine. I don't know because I'm not in men's groups, but I could imagine men having more of an issue with ego because the vulnerability is like not a normal thing.
Yeah, that's not part of male culture. It's not what
Yeah.
we're taught. It's the opposite of what we're taught.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be really hard. And um, I'm blessed with having just amazing guys that come to my circle and show up in my circle. But I've been in other circles and I've seen guys have a lot of difficulty. I've seen guys show up for a whole weekend retreat and not crack at all when there's a lot. I mean, it's scary, and I say that not to criticize those men at all because I have talked to those men one on one, and what has happened in their lives is usually extremely traumatic. So it's just even more scary to open up. So there's no, I don't judge or criticize these guys at all. But you're right. It is very hard for certain men. And I haven't really sat in women's circles. I've sat in a circle with women, maybe not in the deepest, you know, most vulnerable types of circles, but I think it's a common perception that vulnerability and sharing is easier for women. But I know that it's probably not as real as we think, that there's a lot of exception to that. And I
Mhm.
don't like to draw those distinctions of it's harder for men and easier for women. I don't think that
Yeah.
that's true at all. There's a general
Well,
consensus of that, but yeah.
I was thinking as you were talking, like, when have I seen ego in the women's circles that I've been in? And it's a lot of times I could imagine it would look very different than men's ego or men's lack of vulnerability or whatever.
Yeah.
But it does come across in women's circles, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, like what comes up for me is like that catty, that real kind of catty personality or expression, you know. I don't even how would I define that word? It's kind of like combative in this little underhanded way.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I've also seen women flee. Like,
Uh-huh.
this is too real,
Uh-huh.
big of questions.
Uh-huh.
This doesn't work for me, my schedule, like, and they just leave.
Yeah. Hmm.
And and I think that I'm thinking of a specific example, but like I can be vulnerable with this person individual one on one, but like in a group setting, I had never seen her respond like that where she flee
Ah.
fled.
Yeah.
Um and uh that was kind of one of those the vulnerability was too much.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
in nervous system language, it's like she didn't have the capacity to hold that vulnerability.
Yeah.
Um, so then we have to think about titrating like experiences to be able to re-regulate, you know? Um, so I've been knee deep in writing this nervous system course for massage therapy, so it's really top of mind right now. And it's like one of the questions is why do you want to learn this work? And why do you want to take this course? And the reason is because this is how we can translate to each other, you know. Um and I think that ego and sitting together in group and our nervous systems intermingling with each other, it's like it we really to learn this framework has to be it doesn't have to be, but it's like so can be so helpful to understand whenever that somatic experience of like I'm feeling my ego come forward or I'm feeling another person's ego come forward, whether that's like in puffing up or fleeing or sometimes I see the like boss babe vibe, like
Yeah.
that's a lot of that too. It's like the lack of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Um, not that that's a bad thing, not that it's like you should be a boss babe in your own life, right? Like you should be the boss babe of your life, but um if when that piece takes over and there's no space for vulnerability, then that's whenever it becomes um it stops you from
Yeah.
moving.
That specific example there is like tactic of the ego of like projection, you
Mhm.
know. And we'll talk about that all day long, you know, but like you can be in a group and someone could be sharing about something and it's you're this, you're that, you know, I'm gonna be the boss and tell you what you need to do. And I'm gonna be this strong person, like I've already healed and here's this, right? Or whatever. And it's maybe it's like, actually, no, I haven't done the work and I feel insecure about where I'm at regarding my issue, or I feel insecure about just my life, right? And I'm gonna put that on you. You're the insecure one. You're the one who needs to do more work, right? And not me. Not me. I'm good. You know, let me show you some examples of how good I am.
Right, but this soft approach that we're talking about where we actually are holding each part of a person with love and compassion, that's like the long version, right? Like that's not this quick and easy fix like we just death to the ego and everything
Right.
is good. It's oh, we're talking about renegotiating all of our relationships with ourself.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And that's the work. That's the real shit.
Mhm.
Is how can I come back inside and start to relate with myself?
Yeah,
You know, yeah.
because
So
that then trickles out. I mean, obviously, but
yes, yes,
reverberates.
100%. How can I start to relate to myself with love and compassion and understanding? That's where it is. Yeah. So and going back to what you said at the very beginning, I'm like, what do we do? what do we do noticing our desire or actually projecting when we're in group, or we're noticing judgment, we're noticing comparison, we're just getting triggered, a lot. What do we do? Because staying in that isn't gonna help. It's okay to stay in that, if that's where you're at and you don't know how to take action to make a change to what's happening. It's totally fine. And I think everybody's going to need to be in that for a while, of that, like the noticing phase, before you can get to the action phase of the loving compassion, right?
Absolutely.
So, but I think it's the thing to be aware of is notice it, be honest about it, like name it, and let yourself understand that, and then not treat yourself like a piece of shit because of that, because you're feeling judgmental or you're puffing yourself up or making yourself better than somebody. Like, don't judge yourself. Don't throw yourself in a hole. Number one, just notice it. Just have a very neutral noticing. And yeah, step number one. Step number two, start caring for that part of yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not a quick fix overnight, and that's okay. Like, if I could grant one wish, if I were a fairy godmother or something, I would be like, allow people this the time that it takes and not rush it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you might, and stay in it. Don't rush it and stay in it. Like, please don't run away. As uncomfortable as it can feel, to not only be confronted with your pain, but also confronted with your protective ego that's trying to help fix everything. Um, don't run away. Just sit with it. Just neutral. Ah, okay. And keep coming back. Keep returning to the work. Keep going to your circle, or keep seeing your therapist or your coach or wherever this is arising. Keep going. And it's because it might take you time to start to shift into that new mode of from the neutral noticing perspective to, oh, I'm noticing I'm having a feeling right now, or my nervous system is really turned up and there's a critical voice in my head. Let's take a breath. Let's put my hand on my heart,
Mhm.
and bring some care to this part of myself that feels scared and defensive. Yeah, it can take time. So let yourself be in it.
Yep. You're
Yeah,
right where you need to be. Like, you're right where
right
you
where
need to be right now.
right where you need to be, and in the group, right where you need to be. If you're in a good group, that's the best fucking place to be, because you can share, you can be open and honest about it. Like, this is really coming up for me, and people are going to help you become compassionate. They're going to show you the compassion, and then you're going to be like, oh, I can take that stance for myself too.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we conclude?
um that I The only thing I want to add is I think we should have more conversations about group work. I think you and I have mentioned it in the past, and that we both believe this is really the future and how important it is, and how much growth I think is going to happen in the world of healing and in society when it comes to gathering in groups, in intentional ways. So all I want to say is, like, let's have another session and do another recording about that, about the importance of it, and how it works, how effective it can be, and why. Yeah.
Yeah. Stay tuned for group work, um, interconnecting nervous systems, and spiritual materialism.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And we'll catch you on the next one.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Bye.
Bye.